Hello everybody and welcome to my channel today. Today we're going to be doing demonstrations based on the 3 basic methods of cooking videos that came out in some previous weeks. Today we're going to be making a roasted pork roast with baked apples, toasted walnuts, goat cheese, and thyme. We'll be covering some terms that we've covered in those 3 basics of cooking methods, and those will be basting and toasting and searing and deglazing. So as I said, baking and roasting are the cooking methods that we'll be covering today, and they are both dry heat methods of cooking, and they utilize convection and conduction as their heat transfer source. If you are unfamiliar with conduction or convection as cooking methods, please check out the first of the 3 basic methods of cooking videos. The links will be in the description of this video. It's a lot to cover for today, and I'm going to try to make it as quick and concise as possible, so let's get started. Alright, really quick, I'm going to go through the procedures for roasting, and an important note is that roasting and baking are pretty much the same method. One is just more used in terms of breads and fruits and things like that, and roasting is the one that has to do more so with cuts of meat. So, first step in this procedure is to preheat your oven. The second step, as with most methods, is to trim, wash, and prepare your ingredients for the preparation. This is also the point at where you want to apply any rubs or apply any marinades that you might have planned. Today I am just going to season the outside of the roast with some simple salt and pepper and onion powder, but there's a number of different ingredients that you could put on the outside of your roast to prepare it. And so the next step is to arrange the food on the pan. If it's a roast, I would suggest putting it on top of a rack so that when it is in the cooking process, it does not sit in its own fat and juices. This is actually very important for roasting. And if you are baking or roasting a vegetable or fruit, you'll want to make sure that you do not crowd those ingredients on the pan you choose. You can either choose a sheet pan with a lip, you can choose a roasting pan, you can choose a baking pan. But the important part is to not crowd the ingredients. Roasting is generally done with the meat uncovered and is cooked to the desired temperature. Now, depending on the meat type that you're cooking, that will be different. Today, for pork, it will be cooked to 145 degrees at least. One term that may come into play for this is basting. And basting means to moisten food during cooking, such as grilling, broiling, and roasting, with melted fat, pan drippings, a sauce, or other liquids. Basting is usually used to add flavor and prevent the meat from drying out. So first I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and generally for this type of pork roast, you want to cook it about 20 to 25 minutes per pound at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. It's important to note that when you're cooking meat with a bone in it, it will cook faster as the bone acts as a conduction of heat. To pick your fruit, you want to pick one that is a bit underripe, because overripe fruit has a little bit more moisture in it and will cause your fruit to be a little more mushy. If you're using frozen fruit for baking, it is important to drain off the excess liquid, and if you want, you could reserve that liquid to use later in a sauce. The first step to prepare your apple is to wash it. I am leaving my peel on. If you desire no peel, this is the point at which you should remove the peel from your apple. Today I'm using a Granny Smith apple, which is very good for baking. Also remove the core. Opposite of a Granny Smith would be a Red Delicious, which would get very, very mealy and mushy in the baking process. Be careful not to overcook the fruit. The cells break down quickly and release a lot of juices. And then toss with water and lemon juice to stop the browning before you can put it on the baking sheet. Spread the apples on the baking sheet and cook at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 178 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. I'm just going to toss my baked apples with some shallots, lightly season it with a little salt and pepper, and then put it in the oven to bake. For toasting nuts, you want to toast the oven at a preheated temperature of 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 7 to 10 minutes. Be very careful. Nuts tend to burn very quickly due to their fat content. If you want to flavor your nuts, before you put them in the oven, toss them with a little oil or butter and seasonings. If you do not want to flavor them, this step is not necessary. Another way to toast your nuts is in a skillet over medium heat, and this method lasts 2 to 5 minutes. When lining them up on the baking sheet, make sure not to crowd them. Once nuts are toasted and cooled, they can be stored in the fridge or freezer, but not in the cupboard necessarily, as they will go bad much quicker and become rancid. The proportions for oiling or buttering your nuts before seasoning is about 1 tablespoon of oil or butter to 1 cup of nuts. My cut of meat today, I believe, is a butt blade roast, which actually comes from the front portion of the pork, not the back portion of the pork, and it is just a little higher up on the pork than a shoulder roast would be. Now the reason I don't know what exact cut this is because I just started buying my meat local, and this roast was just labeled pork roast, unlike the other ones I got, which were like arm roast and leg roast. My roast is 2.5 pounds, so I will start off cooking it for 50 minutes at 350 degrees. I will insert a meat thermometer to make sure that it doesn't go past 145 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point I'll pull it out and let it do some carryover cooking. And it simply means that the residual heat remaining in the food will continue to cook it for about 5 to 10 minutes. First step is to just blot any extra moisture off of the roast, and this will help get a good sear when we move it to a pan to sear it, because I'm going to sear it today before putting it in the oven, because I intend on making a pan sauce so that I can demonstrate deglazing for you. So first step, I'm just going to season the outside. Make sure to season all the way around the meat for best results. Now, if your roast comes with more fat than this on it, I would suggest trimming it, but I am pretty happy with the amount of fat that I'm seeing. And then just massage that meat. And then just set that aside for a little while you prepare the other ingredients. This step could be done the night before or the day of, and then you could just return it to the refrigerator and let it absorb a maximum amount of flavor from that seasoning. I'm going to go ahead and put those walnuts in the oven. They should take 5 to 7 minutes. Be very careful when you're toasting nuts. They can get burnt super fast. So hopefully I don't burn my first batch. Now that those nuts are in the oven, I'm gonna get started on searing that roast, and then I'll be able to stay close to the oven and keep an eye on those nuts. I'm going to start with just a little fat in the bottom of the pan, and I am using bacon drippings from a dish I made the other day. Searing is another cooking term covered in previous videos, and it means to brown the surface of food quickly using high temperatures. There's a lot of theories about whether or not this actually seals in moisture. I'm not here to debate that today. This is just a really good way to add some flavor to your ingredients. Searing also produces caramelization, and caramelization is a result that occurs from the Maillard effect, which was also discussed in the Basic Methods of Cooking Intro Video 1. While you're getting your pan ready to sear, you should also be getting your roasting pan ready. Today I'm actually using a roasting pan. I could alternatively leave the roast in this pan and put it in the oven because this is an oven safe pan. But like I said before, I'm going to deglaze this pan to make a sauce. And so I want to have a separate vessel to put the meat in. So we'll set that aside. This should be ready to go. Now this will probably take 5 or 6 minutes roughly on each side to get a good sear. So we'll be back when it's time to flip this baby over. The next step is just to put it in a roasting pan. Now that took about 15 minutes. And because I wasn't paying attention, I burnt my nuts. And I'm gonna be honest, I could have predicted this. All we gotta do is start over again with another half cup, and this time I will be setting an alarm. Round 2. All right, while I redo that step, we get prepped on making the pan sauce. Now this at the bottom, what you're probably thinking looks like burnt bits, is flavor and is known as fond. It's a French cooking term for what's going on in the bottom of that pan right now. So we're gonna turn this back up. So for this step, you can use any number of liquids. I'm using a vegetable broth and ume plum vinegar mixture, white wine, red wine, any number of liquids could work here for what you want. And then the goal is for it to pick up all that flavor. Probably should have been just a little bit warmer, but as this cooks, the bits from the bottom will mix with the juices, and I'm gonna let that reduce. I am not going to thicken it with anything today, so we're just gonna let that come to a boil, and then I'm gonna turn it down and reduce that sauce. To reduce just means to simmer or boil until the quantity in the pan is reduced. This is often used to concentrate flavor. There are a number of different ways that you can thicken a sauce, either with cornstarch or a roux. In this case, if I was making a roux, it would be a mixture of flour and butter, and I would cook it until it was a dark nutty color. I'm just gonna let this reduce on its own and become a bit of a thicker sauce. I may also use this to baste the roast a little later. It has been 4 minutes. So instead of turning them all over, I'm just gonna give them a little shake and put them back in. We'll see if that works. You can see they're starting to get a little brown, and actually they smell pretty nutty. So I'm gonna take them out and let them cool. I think that is considered done. All right, since the oven has been preheated at 350 and that's the temperature we need for the roast, I'm gonna start checking it at 45 minutes. If your meat is less than 3/4 of an inch thick, it's best to test it via the side. It's important to do this while the item is on or in the heat source, or immediately after removing it from the heat source and determining that it's done. Let it set for 3 minutes to rest for proper juice distribution. This is very similar to a procedure you would have seen in barbecuing, which is where they mop it with sauce. It's kind of a similar idea. That is perfectly done. All right, everything is done. So I'm gonna take a quick taste, but first, check this out. Roast pork with a reduction sauce and baked Granny Smith apples with shallots, toasted walnuts, goat cheese, and thyme. So it's time to take a taste. This locally raised, non-factory farmed pork is delicious. I don't think I would have had to do anything to it other than salt and pepper, and it is so moist and tender. See how the apples turned out. Just a quick note, if you didn't know, apples and shallots pair excellently with pork. That's it for today. Thank you for watching my video today, and as always, have a great day.